I'm your host Helen Douthwaite Teasdale, and welcome to Brass Evolution, a show where we explore the rich culture and history of the brass banding world. This episode I'm chatting to Ray Farr about his research into the Distin family and their extraordinary influence on the beginnings of the brass band movement. Well, welcome, Ray, to the podcast. I don't think there'll be many in the brass band world who don't know who you are, Ray, but for those who don't know who you are, could you give us a little introduction to yourself?
My name is Ray Farr. I'm getting on now. I'm 75 years old, but I've had a fantastic life in music.
Whereabouts are you living just now, Ray? Give us the highlights.
Start from the end and work backwards. Okay, then
Sure, why
highlights.
not?
Well, I'm living in Oslo now, in Norway, and the weather is really bad, but banding continues at a very high level, both in brass bands and wind bands. I've got a little bit to do with brass bands, but not as much as I'd like, because over here in Oslo, it's more wind bands. They are, quite fanatic. There are hundreds and hundreds of wind bands in Norway, all supported very well by a national federation, the NMF, which is government sponsored, of course, and they're doing a great job.
Are you conducting any bands at the moment?
Oh, yes, of course. On a regular basis, I have a wind band down in Tønsberg, the other side of Oslo. And we're rehearsing hard now for the national championships in a few weeks' time, and they're doing very well. Actually, the band is in second division, but playing very nicely. Yeah, it's a joy to work with them. Let's see. Of course, last weekend was the national championships for brass bands. That was held in the Greek Hall in Bergen. And I'm still very much involved with that, and knew all the bands and all the players by name. In fact, that's the challenge of a weekend like that, is to try to remember people's names as soon as they appear in front of you. So I'm in Oslo, and you're saying, well, why are you living in Oslo? Well, I'm kind of semi-retired from full-time teaching, and before that, I was freelance conducting because of the miners' strike in Granthorpe, where I was there for. But was it 10 years? I was with the Granthorpe Choir Band. That was a full-time job. And before that, I was in the BBC as a trumpet player. So I've had a couple of careers.
We're going to talk today about your research into the Distin family. What got you started on that journey into research?
Okay, well, let's go back a little bit. So I mentioned the Granthorpe Choir Band, and I was the conductor there. When the miners' strike came, no income, so I had to go freelancing. And I had a wonderful time freelancing for about 10 years around the world. And then one day I got a phone call, and I was in a hotel. I got the phone call from this gentleman who said, "Hello, are you Ray Farr? My name is Lord Foster, and I'm talking to you from the Houses of Parliament, and I know all about you." And my heart raced a little bit, and I thought, what the hell is going on here? And he said, well, don't worry about it. It's all flattering. It's all very good news. Would you be interested in a position at Durham University? So I said, yeah. I mean, my freelance career was going actually very well around the world, as I said, but mostly in Norway, at a very high level, some professional bands and orchestras. It was great. But a full-time job is not very secure. You know, people can cancel and at last minute and suddenly have no income. So a full-time job with Durham University was very attractive to me. And so I decided to move over there with the family. The job was tailor-made for me. I was teaching conducting and arranging. And somehow the boss, the big man at the university, made a budget for me and gave me a lot of support to put on some super concerts, as well as combining with a freelance career conducting Reg Vardy Band and some other bands as well. So that was just wonderful for 10 years. At the beginning of the adventure, my head of department said to me, now, Ray, at university, you have to provide some academic papers. What is your research area? What will you be researching and writing on? I said, well, I have no idea. And research was the big word in university, what it still is. And they said, well, give it a little time to think, but you have to do some research into something. And I thought, well, brass, of course, brass bands, that's my passion. that's where I come from. I mean, I started playing the cornet when I was about 6. And my dad, who died just a couple of years ago, he was playing and conducting to the age of 100. So he was a big inspiration to me. So I'm very much from a brass band background. And my grandfather, I was looking at a picture yesterday. Both my grandfathers were in the Hereford Salvation Army band, and which dates back to a lot, just before 1900. So brass bands are my roots, and so that's the area I chose to research. Now, researching it, when you research something, you have to read everything. You have to read all the books on the subject. And there's Trevor Herbert and Roy Newsom and Al Myers and lots of people. I mean, I don't know if you can see behind me. There's a whole stack of books, all on brass bands, early brass bands, the formation and the early influences, the music they played, the people involved. I loved it. I really did love it, and I was getting some sponsorship as well from the university to actually do this, to study for a master's degree and to research in my own subject. The master's degree actually went on to be a PhD. So just last year, I became a doctor. I'm a doctor of music, having studied the Distin family, which was the central focus of my research.
Well, congratulations. I feel
Thank you
like it's
very
been
much.
a long journey for you in this research field, but you've got
Oh,
there in the end. You've got the certificate.
that's right. Yeah, but as I say, this is my third career. Before that, it was full-time conducting, and before that, full-time playing. But researching is now a passion of mine. And even though I've got the doctorship, I'm still researching. I keep going on with it because it's fascinating business. You know, I'm finding scores, brass band scores, original manuscripts from 1855. Would you believe? I mean, really, and
Wow.
these are all from yeah, from my research into the Distins.
Could you give us a little overview of the family and the members?
Yeah, sure. It's a long story, but I'll try and cut it a bit short. And as I say, I've been researching this for many years, and it's a passion of mine to looking into the subject deeper. There was a man called John Distin who was born in the southwest, the Devon and Cornwall area, and he was inspired by the local military band that came along his village, and he started to play the bugle. And then the key bugle in about 1810 became like a melody instrument for a lot of bands, the keyed bugle. At that time, there were no cornets as such and no horns and things, just basic keyed instruments. And of course, the trumpet, the natural trumpet, which he also played and became a star. He joined the Grenadier Guards when he was only 16 years old. So he really was a prodigy at that time, John Distin. His career went on, so he became renowned as a trumpet player, natural trumpet player. All the Handel and difficult Bach high register pieces. But unfortunately, his band was made redundant. The prince who owned his private band sacked everybody, so he was without a job, and he moved to Scotland. And he became the bandmaster of the Taymouth band up there, which is a small military band. I've been up to the castle. It's fantastic to have a look at that where he was with his band and his 4 children. He had 4 sons, and he taught them to play first on basic instruments like the natural horn and trombone, and then they emigrated to some more sophisticated instruments which came around at that time. Okay, so they formed a quintet and were concertizing around Scotland and around Britain, and they became quite famous. In 1844, they went on a tour to France. They were offered engagement for about 6 weeks, playing in the local theatre, just as this quintet. And they used to play orchestral and opera repertoire in a very sophisticated manner. And it was very attractive to many people to be involved with in a high music making level. But in 1844, when they were in Paris, they met Adolphe Sax, who was just at that time inventing his saxhorns. You know, he had a set of sax trombas, sax horns, and saxophone. Of course, we all know about the saxophone. Adolphe Sax was himself a bass clarinet player. So he took his bass clarinet mouthpiece with a reed in, put it into an ophicleide, which has keys, and suddenly he's got himself a saxhorn. But so it's not a big leap, but it was his invention. And the saxhorns grew as a family. And just at that time, the Distins, John and particularly Henry, were very interested to take on these instruments into their group, which were much more homophonic. And then, they created a storm with these new saxhorns. And I just happen to have one here. My instrument collection followed my research, as well as the collection of music and recordings, if I could find some. But the saxhorns were very, very prominent at that particular time. So much so that a band called Mosley bought a set of 8 or 10, I think it's 10 instruments they bought from Henry Distin. Henry Distin was the second son. And when the group started to fold down because John, the father's, his lip was going and his teeth were falling out. It's true, that's what happens, if you drink too much whiskey, your teeth fall out.
Stayed in Scotland too long, perhaps,
Yeah,
Ray.
could be. Anyway, so his John Distin's career was declining, and Henry could see that this was going to be the end of the trip for their concertizing around the world. They went to America and Canada and France, Germany. Some talks about Russia, but I can't find any evidence about that just yet. Anyway, I'm still looking. But Henry Distin, the second son, was keen to take over the family business and started a manufacturing company in London in 1850. Still some playing going on. In fact, Henry Distin got hold of these saxhorns and made his own saxhorn group and Ventil horns, flugelhorn union, and he was doing everything to promote his own make of instruments, actually to get away from the sax name. A little bit of a side there. To get away from the sax name, he changed the name of the tenor sax or the alto sax. I mean, Adolf Sax invented the alto sax, but to get away from the name, Distin called it a tenor horn. It isn't a tenor horn at all. I mean, the tenor horn we have in brass bands is an alto saxhorn. That's what it is. At the beginning, they were forward-facing, and then they were upward-facing, sideways-facing, backwards-facing, all kinds of designs on these saxhorns. But when the Mosley Band took over this set of 10, they won the first ever Bellevue competition in 1853, which is just only 3 years after Henry Distin was starting to manufacture these instruments. And because they won the competition, a lot of bands who were playing ad hoc instruments, a variety of natural instruments and ophicleides and very some weird and wonderful instruments, because they played this homogenic set of instruments, everybody wanted to follow suit. So a lot of bands were converting then to sax horns, and that is the beginning of brass bands. So, I mean, it all goes back into when they said, Ray, what are you going to research? And the beginnings of brass bands, that's it. And my theory, my theory was to prove that the saxhorns promoted by the Distins were really the start of brass bands. And that's been a real fascination for me.
Can we just talk a little bit about the family's influence over publishing? As they seem to have influence in nearly every sphere of amateur brass band music making.
It was Henry Distin who was keen to make money, of course, make a profit, but also promote the name of Distin, which he did extremely well. The Distin Company became one of the biggest in Europe. And he went on with designing instruments, and as you say, publishing. And in 1868, he sold his company to Boosey. So we all know about Boosey and Hawkes and Besson. Well, they were only very small fry in comparison to Distin. It was when Distin sold his company in 1868 to Boosey that things escalated for that particular company. The publishing company didn't do too well compared to Smith, for example, or some of the other bigger names. Boosey and Hawkes actually had their own publishing company, which then took over brass band publishing. But Distins had their own style, and it's really fascinating to find some of those early scores. A lot of it has been lost, actually. There's one piece which has really been unfortunately lost in 1855. I told you about the Mosley Band winning the first ever Bellevue contest, but in 1855 there was a test piece, and this was called Orinthia. Okay, and this was composed by one of the organizers, James Melling, who'd been around for several years and thought it would be a good idea if all the bands had on a equal playing level the same piece to play, as one own choice. And he composed this overture called Orinthia. It's lost. Nobody can find it. I've been searching and searching. I even put on the web and on the British Bands a reward for £100 to anybody who could find this score. It hasn't turned up. I'm still searching for it. But my feeling is that Distin published this, and I found in some of his brass band scores some of the pieces that were played around that time in mass band concerts, even in the 1855 mass band performances that they had at the end of the contest. There were pieces there published by Distin. And I wonder, did Henry Distin actually publish Orinthia, the first ever brass band competition? I'd like to think so, but I can't prove it.
Well, here we're shouting out now. Go into your band libraries and have a look and see if it's there, and get in touch with
Yeah,
Ray
okay.
if you find
I'll
anything.
still the offer for £100 is still there.
Be amazing if we could find it, wouldn't
Oh
it?
yes,
If it must be out there somewhere, Ray.
well, you would think so, wouldn't you?
I know. I hope it still survives. I mean, some of the band libraries I've been in, I think they've still got the music. If they're in situ and they own their own band hall, they'll still have music from when the band was founded.
Wow.
So it might be out there. Who
Well,
knows?
that's good. Let's keep looking. But one of the things I found is in the museums and libraries. In the Edinburgh Library, I took some time up there to research, and I found a very, very nice from 1857 a product book, a list of pieces and with photographs from Henry Distin. That was great. 1857, and then since that I found this other one from 1855. Great, wonderful to find this. And sometimes the pictures come up, not photographs, of course, because this is just really in the early stages of photography and recordings, of course. But some great associations and pictures of Jules Levy, for example, and the Distin family. Some of them, the imagery comes alive to me. And in researching, I find out what pieces they played. And I sort of I listen to the extracts on Spotify, for example, listening to the operas, discovering all the kind of pieces that they would be playing and recreating those scores myself. So that's a lot of fun too.
Ray, you touched on some of the research that you're currently doing. Is there anything in particular that you're researching just now in terms of the Distin family?
Well, there is, yes. I mentioned earlier one of the horns that Henry Distin invented. I say invented because in those days there was no patent and there was no copyright. So Henry Distin would get an instrument from France or somewhere and copy it, just downright copy it, and it's just travesty, really. But he did, and he would put his name to it and say, "This is my new invention." Anyway, one of the instruments he invented, in commas, was called the ventil horn. It looks like it's basically a saxhorn, and they're in different sizes from small ones to big ones. I've got one in the post coming from America. How it ended up in America, I don't know. I'm researching the early stages. I mean, I've already had a bit of information on the ventil horns, but I want to know more about it. What instruments there were in terms of pitch or how they played. I'm going to be playing it myself, in a small group. And what music they used, what pitches there were. That's really important. They look like the modern tenor horn in a brass band, but more circular. So they're in a small version. Let me show you. So this is a ventil horn. It's not a big.
So I'm just going to do a little description there because
Yeah,
so it's
sure.
very small, Ray.
Well, of course, it's a whole family, like the saxhorns were a family.
Right. Okay.
And the saxhorns is the basis of the modern brass band. But this is the ventil horn. You can see it's more circular, but this is the small one. This is actually pitched in high C. And of course, you get them going lower in B flat and E flats and A flats, right down to the huge ones, all kind of circular. conical bore, sounding a little bit like a flugelhorn, a soprano flugelhorn, or actually, I played an E flat one in the Reg Vardy band. We used to get the players to play some of the antique instruments down there in a little group, and you couldn't tell the difference between one of these ventral horns and a modern tenor horn. Basically they're saxhorns, conical bore in different pitches.
Can we just talk about your instrument collection and how it interacts with your research? How many instruments do you have, Ray?
Oh, not so very many. One, two, about 10, I think. One of them's a real, like the original saxhorns, which were forward-facing, but they're all made by Distin. When you're researching, you have to make boroughs. If you're not careful, you can just get carried away with one small topic, and it leads you totally down the garden path to another direction. You have to stay with your subject, focus on it. And so my focus is on the Distins. I mean, there's so many interesting things I could look at in connection with distance, but you've got to draw the line somewhere. Look at this one. Ready?
Wow. Is that a forward facing?
So this is a
yes,
pocket
okay.
cornet.
Wow.
It's a pocket, just a pocket cornet made by Henry Distin, and you can see his logo there. Actually, the logo was designed by Enderby Jackson because they were friends, Enderby Jackson and Henry Distin. But this is a pocket cornet. I mean, it's just for novelty. It doesn't play so very well. It's okay. My dad used to like playing that.
Because of the time period we're talking about and sort of innovations and inventions in musical instrument making, there must be some very wild and sort of fantastical instruments out there that manufacturers were sort of experimenting. Have you seen any sort of very strange looking ones?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. The valve was interesting. The way that the valve started. We all play a Perrine valse now, but in the beginning it was Stürzel, and before that Berlin valves. A lot of influence from Germany, and then of course the valve is in two forms. One is with a piston and one with a rotary. Some people say the rotary valve is more efficient. My own thoughts are that I actually went into designing my own instruments with a flugelhorn, and I'm in partnership now with a guy called Chris Waters. I don't mean to push my own products here, but I am interested in designing brass instruments following all the information and the research I've got.
Where can people find out more about your work, your research, and what you're up to?
Well, the website is pretty full. There's the website rayfarr.com. I wrote a book on conducting, and that's actually all on that website. It's free. It's out there. You can just have it. A book on conducting with some very nice extracts from the Fishburne band. They were great to work with. There's a book, a lot of information on my research with the distins, with the instruments as well, and some music, and some history things, and some recordings. So it's all on the website.
Fabulous. I'll put a link to the website and also the sort of Distin Diaries document that you've put together.
That's ongoing as well, by the way. That's ongoing.
Yeah, the editing, I think, as more research comes out from yourself. So thanks, Ray, for your time. It's been fascinating. And the amount of information that's on the website is just astounding. So thanks again. If you like the podcast, please help it to grow by liking, sharing, rating and reviewing. You can also support the podcast by leaving a tip or buying a perk, including asking my next guest a question or getting a shout out via fan list. Link in the show notes. Podcast music is Mephistopheles, performed by the Illinois Brass Band.